Thank you all for coming by to another Monster Monday, the best way to start your week. I managed to get Monster Hunter Wilds in a semblance of working long enough to hunt this week's terror, the ever-elegant Lala Barina. If you feel so inclined, do me a favor and like the video, and maybe even subscribe to the channel. I'd certainly appreciate it. But I'm sure you would appreciate seeing this creepy conga critter, so let's get to it. Allow me to apologize to any arachnophobes in the audience, but I adore spiders, and creepy crawlies in general. You can blame Geo Kids for that. Anyway, I was super hyped to see that Monster Hunter was adding another Temno-Saren to the criminally small list. I also had a lot of fun fighting the Lala Barina, game issues aside, and I'm eager to bring it to life in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This graceful combatant meshes ballerina dancing with a giant spider and then even a tiny little bit of rose, though the crimson thread it spins bears some resemblance to spider lilies. Sticking with the typical design for Monster Hunter, I use the animal trait for the Lala Barina, and with it coming immediately after the Kwama trace, I settled on using the same level for it, and built it as a level 5 creature. From there, we can start to spin up its devious design. Given the grace of this gorgeous but gruesome spider, the Lala Barina starts off with a high dexterity. It does a lot of dancing and prancing around to warrant this value, but it still packs a punch. A strength between moderate and low helps it lay out some extra damage with its strikes, while it only has a low constitution. It's going to rely on dodging enemies rather than attempting to tank their attacks. It similarly uses a low wisdom, but then in an astounding display, actually uses a positive charisma. This is a rarity for an MH creature, and done entirely for the sake of the Lala Barina's slick dance moves. As for the Lala Barina's perception, it has a moderate bonus, but does come with the classic dark vision, as well as a slightly more unique web sense, which is a bit more common on spiders and other creatures. That high dexterity we used means that the Lala Barina is going to use a high acrobatic skill to help it move skillfully about the battlefield, though it also has a moderate performance and stealth skill, with the former inspired by its obvious ballerina inspiration, and the latter relating to its own dexterity and how it hid in its webbing during its opening scene. It rounds out its skills with a low bonus to athletics, which should help it spring on and possibly entrap prey when its webbing just isn't doing the job. Looking at its defenses, the Lala Barina keeps with that more nimble design and uses a high armor class, in conjunction with a moderate pool of hit points. It uses moderate HP over a low value, since it does have a weakness to fire based on its own weakness from the game. It also has some rather simple components, which can use an extreme armor class since it already has a high base AC. In a slight twist to my typical design, the Lala Barina has a high reflex saving throw, which is a nice break from the typically high fortitude. This time around, its fort save is merely moderate, while it does still take its will as its low save. You may have noticed that some of its components affect its strikes rather than something grander, so let's go ahead and take a look at those. The Lala Barina has 3 strikes, though its ranged strike doesn't actually deal any damage. Its damaging melee strikes have a high attack bonus, but are otherwise rather distinct from each other. Its claws have the agile, reach, and finesse traits, the last of which is shared between its melee attacks. With the agile trait, it uses low damage on this strike. However, by targeting its talon components, players can potentially break them and remove that agile trait. Its stinger is its only other melee strike and is equipped with moderate damage since it comes with the fatal trait and can also trigger paralysis, which we'll look at in a moment. The use of this fatal trait is based on the affinity and critical draw skill on many of the Lala Barina's weapons. While we're talking about it, much like how agile can be removed from the talons, the fatal trait can be removed from the stinger by breaking that component as well. Now while we're in the area of talking about damage and everything, I want to give a quick mention to the fact that the Lala Barina does have the sneak attack feature, letting it deal an extra 1d6 precision damage to off-guard targets to supplement its lower sort of damage. From there, we can take a look at its ranged web trap strike, which uses a moderate attack bonus and doesn't deal any damage. Instead, it immobilizes a target until they escape against a high DC. I normally only use a moderate DC for similar effects, but with targets only being immobilized by this one, a high DC felt fine to me to close out on its attacks. A core component of this creature's kit is Fluff Abdomen. This is based on the Lala Barina's ability to rake its feet through its abdomen and make it look like a blooming rose. With a Pathfinder design, the Lala Barina can do this as 2 or 3 actions to spread its florets in a 30-foot cone or a 20-foot emanation. The cone is the more standard use, whereas the emanation is inspired by the way it will hang from the ceiling and spin around to spread these urticating hairs. With how these hairs seem to dangle and dance through the air, I decided to have them last for 3 rounds, and cause creatures in the area have to make a high DC reflex save to avoid them. The DC can be reduced by targeting and breaking its abdomen component, turning it to a merely moderate DC. However, if the players still cannot evade the hairs, they get another save against its paralysis, which I suppose we should finally take a look at. The design of its paralysis is inspired by the pre-master ghouls, as well as the Lala Barina's primary status. While it has the incapacitation trait, it uses a moderate DC for creatures that come in contact with its hairs or are struck by its stinger. Additionally, afflicted creatures get a save at the end of each of their turns to remove the paralysis, and the DC lowers with each round that they've spent paralyzed, so it gets increasingly easier to escape. On top of leaving lingering florets with Fluff Abdomen, the Lala Barina has a few more moves to possibly paralyze its pursuers. Prominently, Pirouette's primary purpose is to dance across the battlefield while evading attacks. But, if its abdomen is fluffed, this spreads more paralyzing florets as it dances, in addition to letting it safely sashay through severe situations. I also included a reaction for the Lala Barina in the form of Dancing Deflection, which triggers when it is hit by an adjacent creature and has its abdomen already fluffed. This merely lets it expose its attacker to its urticating hairs, potentially paralyzing them and setting them up for its subsequent sneak attack. However, with only a moderate DC on its paralysis, I wanted to give a way for the Lala Barina to make foes off guard outside of that. I also wanted to involve dancing and its performance skill a bit more, and following the monster mash, I ended up adding Dance Through Danger. This is a very simple ability that simply allows the Lala Barina to feint using its performance, and can be likened to the pauses and twitches of the Lala Barina's claws before it finally strikes. I got some gear together for this graceful glider in the form of the Barina Gown. I had originally thought about making a weapon for the Lala Barina, but I ended up changing tracks to a worn item that grants a bonus on performance checks. Players can also call upon the retained power of the Lala Barina to summon its paralytic florets as they move across the battlefield. This relies on a performance check from the player, because I did want to involve that skill a little bit more in the design. Furthermore, this check goes against the reflex DC of enemies, because I envision the player having to dance properly to actually spread the florets that their victims must dodge to avoid. That is another Wilds monster in the bag, and hopefully there's more to come. Spinning scarlet silk, this sinister spider steps, sachets, and slides with supreme suppleness, setting stunning spines sailing before striking from a suspenseful sight. I really want to make more monsters from Wilds, but my computer was struggling to stream and run the game at the same time, so I'm going to have to figure that out. I will actually be off next week, so I might take that chance to figure out mods that are supposed to help it run smoother. Until then, I hope you have fun running the Lala Barina, perhaps creating a paralytic parlor your players must penetrate to slay the spider. Let me know what you think of this monster and what other creatures you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see on the channel and want to see more, check out the Monster Monday blog, which is linked below, along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, see you in 2 weeks, and have a monstrous Monday.